In this video, we're going to cover some graphing basics that'll get you started in chemistry class. Topics include the x and y axis, independent and dependent variables, linear versus nonlinear graphs, and curve fitting. The horizontal axis on a graph is known as the x-axis. The vertical axis is known as the y-axis. The x-axis is where the independent variable will go. The y-axis is often known as the dependent variable. A lot of times in science you'll hear of something versus something else on a graph, and this usually refers to y versus x, or the dependent variable versus the independent variable. For example, density equals mass over volume. And if we were to create a graph of density, we would plot mass versus volume. This indicates that mass will go on the y-axis and volume will go on the x-axis. Another example used in chemistry class is absorbance versus concentration. In this example, absorbance will go on the y-axis, concentration will go on the x-axis. The mathematical relationship between the dependent and the independent variable, or between x and y, determines whether the graph will be linear or exponential. In these two graphs you see here, you can see that the graph on the left, the points form roughly a straight line, and so we would call that a linear fit. In the graph on the right, you can see that the points form a curve, and so in this case we would call that an exponential. If the points form a straight line, such as the graph on the left side, then the equation of that straight line follows the mathematical formula y equals mx plus b, where m is the slope of the line and b is the y-intercept. In other words, this is going to be where the line intersects the y-axis. To create a curve fit for some data, you can use a spreadsheet program such as Excel or LibreOffice or Kaleidograph. There's lots of different spreadsheet programs that you can use. They all do basically the same thing, which is they mathematically determine a straight line that best fits the data that you have graphed. Using the best fit line equation, which has the form of y equals mx plus b, we can solve for mass or volume if we know one or the other. So, for example, if the volume is 2, what is the mass, assuming we have an equation y equals 3x plus 2? So what we would do is plug in 2, and we want to put the 2 where the volume would go. And since volume is on the x-axis, then we're going to put this 2 in for the x. So that means that if we know the volume, then what we can do is trace that up to the curve and then over and find the mass. And so we can solve that mathematically by using the best fit equation for the line. In this video, I'm not going to get into how to create the graph using Excel or LibreOffice. We already have tutorials for that on the website. They're in PDF format. So when you go to create your graph, if you're using Excel, you can download that tutorial and use that.